Hello, I'm Caroline Marshall, and welcome to Bump to Business Owner, the podcast speaking to mums in business, you. I'll be in conversation with some of the most inspiring women and mothers in enterprise about their journey, how they created their successful businesses alongside raising their children, and what that looks like in work and family life. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Bump to Business Owner. Please welcome the incredible Dr. Jo Carlile, BPS Chartered Clinical Psychologist, Trauma and Neurodiversity Specialist and mother of two. Jo is the woman behind the scenes disrupting the culture of mental health. Previously an NHS Senior Clinical Consultant, specialist in neurodiversity, Jo was supporting children, families and adults presenting with a variety of issues, all needing to support to improve their mental well-being. She is now the founder of Carlisle Psychology, a service that provides individuals and businesses with specialist psychology support, supporting employees, founders and businesses championing the ND perspective and supporting companies to create inclusive environments. And on top of all of this, she is soon to be tech founder, which I cannot wait to talk about. But hi, Jo, how are you? I want to call you Dr. Jo then. I'm not used to this.
Jo is fine.
For anyone who doesn't know, Jo is a local mum, so I've known Jo from a lot of networking events and things around here. So I'm like, oh, Dr. Jo. I don't normally call you that.
I definitely just go by Jo. So yeah, very happy to be Jo. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, well, it's great because today is World Mental Health Day that we're releasing this. So for anyone who might, need a little time to themselves to maybe feel like they've got Dr. Jo on their side, or it may not be the day for you to listen, but I know we're going to go into some lovely topics today. I would love to know, anyone who's worked in the NHS as a clinical psychologist, how did you get into this? What was your path? Was it something you always wanted to do?
It's a good question. I mean, I never really liked school, which was interesting. I just never really apart from history, I didn't massively like school or learning. So I never really sure what I wanted to do when I was older. And then I think I was like a sort of a teenager and someone said, oh, about psychology. And I was like, oh, what's that? And they're like, oh, it's the study of people. And I was like, oh, hang on, this sounds really interesting. And so I just fell in love with it from there, really, like learning about behavior and what drives people and what challenges people. And so I went to university to study psychology and kind of just sort of fell in love with the sort of mental health aspect of it, because there's all kinds of different avenues for psychology, but helping people specifically and like making people feel better about themselves when they're kind of not doing so well was just something I was drawn to. So then a master's, and then quite a long sort of journey into being a clinical psychologist. So you sort of have to do various like assistant psychologist posts, and I did a master's and then did my training at UCL.
So, amazing. And then I've got some friends who are also clinical psychologists, and it's a lot of work, you guys, which is not surprising with how deep you have to go with people. And I'm interested because you said school and learning wasn't really for you, and you identify as neurodiverse. Do you think there was an element of that there? What was it like growing up in a world where we talk about this a lot more now, and obviously you're informed on this, so the way you'll be raising your children, I can imagine, is very different to your experience.
Interesting. I mean, my generation, we didn't really talk about neurodiversity as it's spoken about today. There was the idea of like ADHD boys just kind of running crazily around the school, or kind of people who had a diagnosis of autism and were perhaps in other types of schools. So I think for me, I didn't really...
It's like the extreme end, isn't it? Rather than...
exactly. Yeah, and I think through my training, I sort of learned much more about the way that the brain is wired, the way that we think and feel and plan and problem solve, and the way that our sensory experiences kind of interface with the world. And then through that, I've just got more and more experience in ADHD and autism and neurodiversity and trauma specifically. And I've just sort of realised, I guess through my own sort of therapeutic journey, that actually I have a very sort of neurodivergent mind. And that's one of the reasons I think I didn't really enjoy school and learning, is I don't focus well in those types of environments. And so it's only once I really sort of found something I was really interested in, like psychology, that I was able to sort of apply my thinking and my concentration and my focus and kind of my journey is a bit sort of backwards, I guess, as it were. Like I was supporting people who had neurodiverse minds before I kind of realized my own. And I think having children has also given me even more insight into strategies and masking that I was doing pre-children that I don't necessarily have the capacity for now. So I think that's
Yeah.
also quite an interesting sort of transition. I think lots of women probably really find out they have a neurodiverse mind through their own sort of motherhood transition, I guess.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I've not thought of it like that because I do think your children are little mirrors to you, aren't they? Like you start
Mm,
realizing, well, you find like bits that are like, oh, this child is really like me. This one's really like my
yeah,
partner or their
yeah,
father.
yeah,
But it is that capacity piece I've not really thought about, isn't it? Of like, I just don't have time to mask what you're masking before, pretend to be
yeah,
something different.
yeah, exactly. And just like the coping strategies that you develop, like I'm someone who's in order to be quite organized and focused, I have to put a lot of effort into doing that. And I can be really organized. I can be an incredible planner, but I have to put a lot of effort into doing that. And when you have small children or you're not sleeping well or your hormones are kind of all over the place from birth, etc., like putting those, those quite high effort tasks and strategies in place is really hard. And so I think lots of people realize often how they've been coping for so long when they then have children and things are feeling more wobbly.
I think even if you don't have a neurodivergent mind, it's like a lot of women can identify with that of like trying to present always as perfect in our society. That's how it is as women, a lot trying to present a certain way. And then after
Yeah.
children, you're just like, I just can't do this anymore.
Exactly. Like obviously we were talking then about, a neurodivergent mind, but actually we don't really always need to separate a neurodivergent mind from sort of a neurotypical mind. And even I
Yeah.
don't even know whether there's a separation. For me it's like every individual has the way that their brain is wired, and that brain wiring is a product of, your genes, your experiences, your neurodiversity. It's your exposure to trauma. Like you are who you are, and whether
Yeah.
you're however you're wired, you're right, as a mother you face all kinds of expectations and challenges.
I'm going to completely divert here because that's a point I actually kind of wanted to raise in this was that yeah, obviously your genes, your experience, and just how you are wired, but there is this element of trauma as well in it, as you are trauma informed. Something because I've learned on my journey of healing post motherhood was that my parents got divorced at a very young age. I was under 3, so yeah, I was 2, and I always brushed it off and was fine about it. And then it was realizing actually my brain went through something there, and that impacts you as you grow up, kind of thing. And it's completely moldable and fixable, but it's kind of that awareness of it helps you kind of heal from it.
Yeah, I think there's so much now that we learn about it. I guess the neuroscience research is really where you go for that. And I'm not the greatest researcher in terms of being able to hold names and everything in my mind, but what the research is really showing and has been over the past probably sort of 10 years more, but it's building more and more momentum, is just our brains are really susceptible to what we experience and how we're raised and what we go through. And that's not to say that's a kind of negative thing. It's just, like you say, an awareness. When we have awareness that we're a product of our genes, our temperament, our environments, we are then able to understand ourselves so much more. And if there has been, well, to be honest, life is traumatic and stressful. So, and it's just varying degrees of it, but everybody experiences struggles and trauma. It's just whether it's kind of in a quite obvious, explicit way or whether there's things that are a bit more subtle. But learning your own trauma story or your own experiences can be really healing, like you say.
And can I ask, because I immediately think, I mean, it's 2024 as we're recording this now, but I've had to do a lot of healing over COVID after what happened to us. We almost lost our second child during it and things. But I look at people who have kind of blocked it out a little bit. Do you think as a society we're still kind of recovering from a bit of a trauma there, which has been something I've thought about recently?
Yeah, for sure. I think about that a lot actually, because it was such a sudden experience, and that's often for humans and the human brain, anything that's really sudden and kind of disruptive can be really like blindsiding for people, and the unknown and the uncertainty, like humans and our human brains often, what we hate more than anything is uncertainty. Like we actually just want to know. We just want to know things. And even if it's the worst thing, it's the knowing. And actually, there was a period of like probably a year of real uncertainty, real fear, real anxiety. It disrupted people's lives in all types of different ways. And actually, again, when I think about individuality, which is a lot about how I work with people, is everyone's experience of that would have been so different. Some people were working and carrying on and working in hospitals and going through all that kind of trauma. Other people were having babies on their own with no support. Other people were separated from loved ones. People lost people without seeing people. Like everybody's experience is really individual. And I think what you're saying is right. Like the time it takes for us to process and work through that, again, really varies. And for lots of people, it's been 4 years actually. It's a really short time, and they might have then had to throw themselves into something, and they're only just kind of recovering from it and reeling from it now.
And you kind of also got to have that awareness that, because like I said, there's the coping strategy of like, oh, well, that happened. And, at the end of the day, I didn't lose anyone, or I went through this, but so did my friend kind of thing. And loads of people make excuses for things of why they shouldn't have to feel a bit of grief, I don't know, for that period. Yeah. And because you were a young mum as well, weren't you?
I had my first baby 2 weeks into the first lockdown. Yeah. And we actually moved house as well.
Oh, my goodness.
When he was 2 weeks old. Yeah.
And it was lockdown and it still went through.
Yeah, we were one of the last people who had an already agreed move before the pandemic hit. Because, I don't know if you remember, it was really quick. We exchanged on my son's due date. Then 2 weeks late, or a week later, we went into lockdown. And then a week later, we had the baby. So we were in that first kind of cohort. And so we moved without the removal men coming in. I mean, the whole thing was like very, very surreal, as you can imagine. But we had our first son was literally a COVID baby. He was basically the first cohort of COVID babies. Yeah.
Wow. And he's just started school. So
yeah. And actually, like COVID, took a lot from lots of people. It was a really, really rough time for lots of people, myself included, in terms of, that first early birth and the lack of support. But what COVID also gave us was we had a year at home, just me, my son and my husband in our home, just the three of us. My husband worked from home, and it forced an incredibly strong attachment because it was literally just us. And there was something, we were quite fortunate that we didn't have homeschooling older kids, all that real tough stuff that people had. We just had the three of us. So I often see that in times of struggle and things in life, when, life throws you something really tough. Sometimes, not all the time, of course, but sometimes there are sort of the mirror edge to it is something that can be quite strengthening, or something that can be quite unique in itself that can give you something. So sometimes it's important to look for that as well, if it's there.
Oh, there's important to look for that, which you definitely have. And I think it's also important for anyone who went through the same as you, who did have a harder perspective on it. That's okay as well, isn't it? I think it's that thing as well. Like, I think there was, like you said, the lack of support, and if your mental health or a traumatic birth or a NICU experience, for example, I think if you went through that in your first year, that's okay. Don't compare yourself to someone who was homeschooling or had a toddler and a baby. I think we can't compare our stories, but there will be things that have come out, hopefully, for the amazingness from it, and for others there's that time to grieve for it, I guess. As well.
Like there's a lot like that pandemic period is a lot of loss, a lot of loss. And I think what you say is so true. Like it's so easy for us to just look at other people's stories and think that that's what we should be experiencing, or someone else took that from it, why can't I take that from it? There's so much, that's such a real trigger for any kind of mental health struggle, is thinking about others. And it's hard. Your story is your story, and sometimes you go through a muddy year, and those muddy years are really hard, and you never know when your next kind of sunny year is coming. So you just kind of gotta get the support, like batten down the hatches, like just take each day as it comes. And for lots of people, the pandemic was like that.
That's fantastic advice. And was it quite healing for you with your second, do you think? Like not
I
being able
think,
to go out?
yeah, it was interesting actually. I mean, I have a therapist. I mean, any therapist you see should have their own therapist. Like,
Yeah.
let's be clear about that. So I have, a wonderful therapist, and so I did a lot of healing in that first year because we had a very difficult birth. And so I felt like I had already, I guess, kind of come to peace with it. I guess what was interesting is that was my script. If you just have
Yeah.
one baby, your script is you have a baby, no one's around, and every day you get up and you do the same thing. Whereas when I had my second baby, it was a bit like, oh, you can sort of do this, or you could go out with them. So like, I think just because I just didn't have
And
that
thank goodness,
script.
because you had a toddler then, because it
Exactly. Well,
is,
that's when I
and
really
you don't know
appreciated it.
that when you have a baby. And I
Yeah.
think now you've
Yes.
got a 4-year-old and
Two.
two,
Yeah.
two. So you've got
Yeah.
4 and 2.
Yeah.
I guess you can appreciate. Oh, this is.
That's
I
what
need
I'm
to get
saying.
outside with
That's
them.
why I felt like that's why for me, I was one of the lucky ones. Like, I had a COVID baby, but he was my first, and that's what I felt like I was lucky in that respect. If I'd had a COVID baby with my second, totally different story. That's hardcore. For all the mums out there that did the more than one kid at home, homeschooling, whatever you had going on, like that is just you've raised the game. You've really raised the game.
I think that's why. No, it's so healing. I think it's yeah. Like I said, I like to think all stories are valid, and we've all taken stuff. There was definitely positives from it that time. The fact I went on a healing journey after it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So you've worked in the NHS for years. What did your transition look like from going from the NHS to self-employed? Was that strategic with motherhood?
I mean, that's why kind of when I spoke to you before and you said what podcast you did, and I was just like, literally, that's my story. Like I worked in the NHS for what was it? Must have been about 15 years in total, training and working,
Wow.
and had my first baby and didn't really hadn't massively planned to leave the NHS completely. Thought I might kind of do a day private and then stay in the NHS. But yeah, had my son, and then I guess I just kind of realized suddenly how untenable my job was. It was down in sort of South London, like the hours, etc. Just all of it just suddenly felt really difficult and didn't really match. I didn't feel like it matched my kind of new mothering life. And
Yeah.
so I'm just was in such a grateful position to be able to start. I just started with like one client. I still worked in the
Wow.
NHS, so like I went back after, realized that this wasn't sort of sustainable. I thought, okay, I'll
Yeah.
just like build up my private work and just leave. And but yeah, I just started with one client. I just had this consultant who referred me. He sort of encouraged me to sort of start my own practice, and then yeah, just suddenly I realized actually this was really quite doable. And so I just took the plunge, I think, perhaps 6 months later. And
How many days a week had you gone back to the NHS for?
I'd
Had you planned
gone
on going back full
back,
time or?
no, I'd gone back I think 4 days. I think I'd gone back. No, I'd gone back 3 days, I think. I was going to have one day with my son and then one day private. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I took the plunge. I just sort of thought, I'm just going to do this. And then, yeah,
Yeah.
just like 4 years later now. I do about almost 4 years. Yeah, it's this November, 4 years, and now I work sort of full time-ish, sort of do condensed days. And yeah, like people, yeah, I'm helping people, and it's a really different type of work, but I love
I was
it.
going to say, because in the NHS, it does feel like having someone. I was kind of desperate for help at one point, and
Yeah,
it is, but I've got privilege and I'm a functioning person on the outside. That mask
yeah,
continued.
yeah, yeah,
And it was like knocking the door down, and it's for someone to get to your stage in the
yeah,
NHS.
yeah,
That must be a completely different client for someone who, like
yes.
myself now, would either pay privately or use like company health insurance, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So where I was working was people were really in crisis. They were really sort of
Yeah.
struggling. And I think I've been really fortunate actually over my career. I've seen people at various stages of struggle. And obviously the best thing is to try and get in as early as we can, but that's obviously really hard, and that's not the way that the NHS system is designed at the moment. So my NHS work was much more around sort of crisis, and sort of what we call acute, which is just kind of like quite intense struggles and moments of unwell. And then now in my private practice, I still have clients who are really struggling, but they're managing to, perhaps like you say, just have a bit of a facade as well, which kind of enables them to sort of stay out of the NHS system or out of hospital. And then I've also got more and more clients now who are much more proactive, actually. So they come to me when perhaps things haven't got to the point where they'd be knocking on sort of NHS services, and they're trying to be more proactive. I think that's a lovely thing I've seen in the last, like, maybe coming out of the neurodiversity sort of movement, is people are just much more willing to seek help sooner. Like, there's a real, for me, there's a big push towards people just being aware of their mental health and speaking to people or getting support. I think, obviously, I know it still has some stigma, but I don't think it has the type of stigma that like it had when I was even first starting out. So I do think we're moving towards being a more proactive sort of society, potentially.
That is so nice to hear, because that's what I've learned all about this. It's not linear, it's maintenance. And if you look after your body, which so many people now are passionate about, working out, maintaining their body, and from a health perspective, not talking about it just from a physical looks perspective, but that the brain is huge, and that's what we need to do. It's a muscle that we need to look after, isn't it?
Totally. And I love what life is not linear, and the struggles that life throws at you, they don't come in a predictable way. They don't come in the same format. And if you keep up, exactly like you said, if you just keep up your mental health as a priority and maintain it, when life throws you stuff, you are in a much better position to respond and to manage it. And obviously, I'm totally biased. I'll sort of shout from the rooftops about this, but it is so important. And a lot of more clients that I am getting now are doing more of that, which is really encouraging to see, because then I can see such change. And that's the one thing about being a psychologist, is I feel so grateful that I get to watch people go through like transformations. Sometimes people are really, really struggling because life has given them something really tough, and you see they come and they put in so much effort, and then the reward pays off. Their lives are quite transformed, like as you've experienced in your healing journey. It is transformational how you can
and I think it is work, is what you've said there, because I did a whole year of EMDR therapy with a wonderful therapist, and it is like, she was like, you've worked so hard, and looking back on it, it was like my business sales wise and things aren't as busy as this year, and it's because there was a reason, because I was working so hard over here.
And EMDR is like, oh my god, it's just wonderful.
I feel like I don't do enough service for EMDR. I talk about it and people are always like, what is that?
Because it's got a stupid name.
It's really long. I can't remember long acronyms.
Eye movement desensitization reprocessing. But for anyone that's listening, forget that immediately. It just doesn't matter. Just call it EMDR. It's fine. It's a wonderfully organic approach to healing. It kind of originally came from sort of veterans and PTSD research, and more recently it's been used for people who are stuck. So people who are kind of stuck feeling really anxious, or stuck feeling really low, or stuck in life, just kind of like not sure what's up with them, or also just like not sure where they want to go, just feeling a little lost. Like, you can use it really for anything. And it's such a wonderful approach because it's really natural. It's essentially putting your brain into a space where a natural space where we process and heal anyway. Kind of a bit like what we do in our sleep when we process, what we've experienced in the day. And it can be quite intense, as you may or may not have experienced. Like it pulls up stuff, but the releasing of it and what people can then get over and heal from is just wonderful. It's a great approach.
Yeah. And It's an interesting one because I don't know where I first heard of it. I think I was really desperate to like fix my trauma
Yeah,
from almost
yeah,
losing our baby. But
yeah,
I actually found out you can get it's available a lot on the NHS now. But
yeah.
what seemed crazy to me was in my area it is, but then only up to 18 months post birth. And I was like, how long, from your experience, does it take for PTSD to represent in some people, especially women?
What, you can only get it up to
18
18 months post
post so post the trauma
post trauma.
so in this case it was maternity services, so it was 18 months post
Yeah,
the birth, and for me, it was a few hours
yeah,
after the birth, and that was when I'd literally first kind of got noticed that I needed help in the
yeah,
NHS, and they did provide some temporary support, and then I was lucky my husband had bupa, so we found a longer term solution through the right networks who'd formerly worked in that service as well.
yeah,
But
yeah.
18 months. How long does trauma sometimes take to arise? And do you think, because I was looking into it, is it long, especially for women who have been breastfeeding, pregnant,
Yeah,
hormones, maybe
yeah,
having another child,
yeah, yeah.
like,
There,
and women's diagnosis turns up differently for men? We're learning this, aren't we?
I mean, they obviously. I don't. I never want to kind of criticise the NHS service because
No, I'm not,
everyone's
because I understand the cost restraints of this.
everyone's doing what they need to do, but the system is run backwards. It's run through a lens of crisis rather than a lens of prevention and early spotting. And I think for me, you asked the question, how long does trauma present? There isn't a timeline. Like there isn't. We have to be thinking about mental health from a really individualized perspective. Someone's PTSD might show up, 3 months in. Someone else's PTSD might show up 25 years in. Like there is no timeline. It's exactly what you said. It's how available is that person to recognize what they're going through? How safe is it to do the work? You now know what it takes to do work and what it can come up, and the cost it has in terms of your availability for your business or your family or your partner or whatever else might be going on in your life. So for me, like the human brain and body is an amazing species, and it has a very good sense of knowing, can I go through this healing journey now or not? And it won't present until it's possible or until you get to a point where you can't function. Those are the two things that will happen. And because of the system and the kind of the constraints we have, people only get pigeonholed into a certain path. And if it suits them, they can grab that then. But if it doesn't suit them, that opportunity's lost. And so, for me, it's so much more healthier to think about mental health and trauma and healing from such an individual's point of view. And if we had more knowledge and awareness about what's going on for us and what kind of individual support there could be out there, I think people would have a much easier access to things. But right now, it's not quite like that, as you experience. You thankfully were able to get some support in a different avenue that may not be open to other people.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true, because I know often as well, I know it's like, for example, CBT works for some people. I've found my experience, it doesn't work for me. And it also involved homework via the NHS, which I thought was really unsuitable for a woman who's just had a baby and got another one in a lockdown. And I think that was the main part, especially.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I'll just add that.
No, but especially when you're like type A and you're like, tick, I'm fixed. I've done my homework.
Yeah.
I thought that's what I found. I now look back on that, finding that whole process hilarious. It wasn't funny at the time, but now I look on it.
Yeah.
And so if you were like in a dream world, you've got this budget to flip around looking after mums after they've had babies. What do you think would be some amazing things to put in for women?
I think I would definitely start it pre-birth for sure. If there was literally no resource constraints, I would prioritize mental health and physical health because they're so interlinked. I would really be prioritizing that. Pre-birth, as part of your midwifery care, there would be a lot of sort of mental health prevention, physical health, kind of like really prioritizing the mum. And then I think I would automatically have every single mother like clocked into some kind of group that they
Yeah.
obviously don't have to attend, but I wouldn't make it like optional. I'd be like, it's like opt out. I'd be like, this space is here for you. You know, you don't need to
Yeah.
confirm it. It's just a drop in, just come along. Because I think what people don't realize pre, you think about before you have a baby, you haven't met your mothering self. Like
No.
she's not here
Yeah.
yet. You actually,
Yeah.
as much as you can imagine, like, oh, like this is who I'm gonna be, or this is how I'm gonna feel, or like,
I'm gonna be
you
so
know,
chill about everything.
yeah, exactly. Like, I'm gonna have this amazing birth, or like after this, I'm not gonna see anyone, or I'm gonna see everyone, like whatever it is, until she arrives, and then you meet your mothering self, and you're like, whoa, okay. Like, and you start to get to know her, and you start to get to know this new baby. For some people, they see their baby and that's it. They think, my goodness, like I am so connected to this baby. Somebody else, it takes like 6 months, a year to like really feel that
Yeah.
connection. Like it's such an individual journey. And I feel like if what we really need as a system is to have all the bells and whistles of the support available to everybody, and then it's an opt-out type of thing. Because I think at the
Yeah.
moment what we have is completely and like we said, we get it, we totally get why, but we're in dream world right now. But what we
Yeah,
have,
no,
yeah,
we're in
we're in
Dr. Joe's
fantasy
world
land.
right
Yeah, yeah,
now.
we're in
This
Dr.
is
Joe's
it.
world, yeah. But at the moment we have this idea of there's really minimum, and then you opt in, and you have to kind of, firstly, that opt-in process requires you to know. Like it requires the mother to know that she needs some sort of help. And
Yeah.
actually, for so many people, you don't even
Oh,
know.
I was the same, especially after
Yeah,
my second, like, well, after my second, it was like, oh, I've not got PTSD, and apparently it comes out after 12 weeks. Tick box, I'm fine, because it
yeah,
wasn't the classic
yeah,
symptoms, even
yeah,
though I did actually have some of those symptoms. But I
yeah,
was like, oh, but that only happened once. It's
yeah,
okay.
yeah, exactly. So, firstly, like people don't always have the knowledge. So how do they know?
Yeah.
And then, like you've said, you have to kind of say you get to the baseline, you're like, okay, actually, I think I need some support here. I need some extra kind of like eyes on this to check. You've then got to go through various hoops to kind of get to something. Then there's probably a wait list. Then there's thresholds. Then there's, like you say, all kinds of like pathways, like a flow chart,
Yeah.
isn't it? Do you have this? Yes, no. Like, and actually, for me, if we had a culture that just recognized that you're about to go through a huge transformation in terms of your mothering self, you're also about to suddenly become incredibly uh, maybe worried or preoccupied about another living baby, and what's that going to do, and how's that going to impact on your demands, and if you have other children, like there's this, if we already go
Or
in
a
with this
career you don't want
baseline.
to change.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. There's
because,
so many layers to
yeah.
it that if we sort of had this thing of just say like you're about to go through something amazing, but this is big. This is really big. Like, so we've got all this stuff if you need it, and then can you strip away things that you don't need? That would be, I'd want to go at it completely the other angle, basically. It's kind of like going on a wild camping adventure. You wouldn't go with no supplies, would you? Can you imagine just sort of going to your
It's
first
so
wild
true.
camp with like not even a tent? You'd be like,
But we get sold all the
no,
things we need rather than the actual
yeah,
things we need. It's about
yeah,
the stuff. It's about the
yeah,
buggy, the
yeah,
things. And I actually
yeah.
wonder this from a psychologist perspective. I think it's also about change. I've started to think the fact that,
Mm,
like, I know someone quite close to me has just had their first baby, and I couldn't tell them anything because you can't do it on a one-on-one basis, and they don't want to change like I did, like other mothers all have,
yeah,
but they don't want to do that, so they really
yeah,
don't think it's going to happen to them. And
yeah.
I think it's a change thing, and it is, so many people are afraid of change until you
It's the
realize it can be
uncertainty.
amazing.
That
It's
uncertainty again.
yeah,
It's exact. The brain does
yeah.
not like to think of uncertainty, and that is what little babies give you all the time is uncertainty and unpredictability, and like you say, change, a whole new way of being. And for me, like my mothering self, I think she's amazing. She's actually lovely and amazing, but she's got the strength and resilience that I didn't know I had. But my goodness, it's hard. It's so hard. And there's so much more talk now about how hard mothering is, especially being a mother and building a business, and all, so many mothers out there are building businesses, and it is really, really tough. And for me, those two positions can be there. You can have complete admiration and proudness for who you've become as a mother and what you're dealing with, at the same time as thinking, oh my goodness me, this is really hard. And sometimes I just want to go back to my old life, lay on the sofa and watch Netflix and think I've got no time this weekend when, quite frankly, we had a lot of time.
I love that. Can I just highlight that? It's the permission to feel both, because then often you feel like you can't say, for a second, it's not that I don't love my kids.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't want to be around them. I just need a minute for my brain to calm down and do all of this. And people are like, wow, you chose this life, Jo.
Yeah. But also, just to say other things for any other mothers that are listening out there as well, it's never enough. Okay. So like you say, you can hold the two positions. You have this one position where you're like, I'm in love with my mothering self. My babies are beautiful. I love them so much. And then my other position is, I can't wait for a break. I can't be anywhere near anybody right now. I don't want to hear the word mum ever again in my life. And you go and you have that 10 minutes and it's not enough. And then you go and you have that weekend away and it's not enough. And it'll never be enough, but that's fine. You just have to, like, everyone feels the same. It's never enough of a break, but also you can't get enough of them when you're back.
Oh, I love that. And Jo, we've talked about this. You're a little bit behind me with 4 and 2, and I'm at 6 and 3. I have to think about the ages there. I remember when we first met, we bonded over just having 2 crazy boys that run in different directions. Yes. Boy mums to a core, and I'm not saying it's not hard with everyone, but how have you, because I just feel sometimes I've got some friends who are now also boy mums. I'm like, thank the Lord. So it's not just me. But I grew up I'm very feminine, as anyone can tell by looking at me. Grew up in a very feminine household, went to an all-girls school. And I think that's been a real change for me, having this masculine energy around the house constantly. Do you think that's a thing? Am I being alone here?
Do you know what? It totally is. It's really interesting because, I mean, I sort of see it, like you said, it's energy, you know, because I see children, and again, it's like a spectrum. But I see children, there's like a male energy and there's a feminine energy, and it's just what, I guess, how we label things. And there are some biological girls who have a male energy as children, and the same.
Definitely. I've got some friends who are like that as kids, definitely.
Exactly. So like, I think when I talk about when I talk about the male and female, I see it as an energy. And I definitely have 2 male energied boys. And you're right, there's as a connection you have, there's loads of memes on Instagram, on Instagram now about boy mums, and it's so true. You know, when you meet another boy mum, and you know that you can hang around with them more, because they will understand that there'll be a lot of physical action, there'll be a lot of chaos, there'll be a lot of mess, there'll be a lot of high energy, and you don't always get that with feminine energy children. And I definitely completely identify with what you're talking about. You know, I now have a very male energied household, and I actually grew up with 2 brothers, so I'm very used to boy energy. And I guess I've always been not a tomboy, but I've always dressed a bit more sort of boyish than perhaps really feminine. And since having my 2 boys, I now wear more feminine things, and like, I've painted couple of the rooms in the house a bit pinky, and I'm like, come on, I'm harnessing all the feminine energy that I have to balance it out. And I think as mothers, we really struggle with that masculinity sometimes, like the wrestling and the noises and the rough play.
Thank you. I've only just gone through this moment of enlightenment where I'm like, it's okay to realise that you've been living in a household that you weren't brought up in, kind of thing.
It goes against us. Like, we don't. Our kind of primitive urge is to kind of snuggle and nurture and contain and calm, and actually our boys don't always need that. So it's hard, I think. I
send them to my husband when they need the.
Fortunately, I'm the same. I have a male.
He can do that,
and I bought these headphones off. Not headphones. They're like noise cancelling earbuds off Amazon. And I put them in, and they've been a game. I'll send you the link.
Right, let's put a link in the notes for this.
They're a game changer. They kind of muffle the sound, and particularly if we think about sort of the feminine cycle, there's certain times of the sort of monthly cycle where the noise for me is really difficult. And
Same,
so
and
I
I've
plugged them
just
in.
noticed that the
Yeah,
past few days, and even had to say to and he even starts to get it. I communicate it around my husband
yeah,
that I'm
yeah,
like, this is too much for me, and he
yeah.
said like, Mum's at her sensitive time.
Yeah,
Let's.
I say it to my boys. I say I've got quite a lot of hormones in my body at the moment, and I can't handle the
Yeah,
noise. And so I'm going to put my headphones in. Like I just say, like, Daddy's going to play, and I just go into another room and I just zone out. And it's a struggle, I think, for mums of male energy humans, not to feel quite not disturbs a bit too extreme, but like it clashes with you. It clashes with you to hear them sort of play fighting or the noise. It doesn't sit with you when particularly when you need your environment to be calm and chilled and quiet at certain
yeah,
times.
no.
So yeah,
It's so
it's the
true.
boy mums.
I think it's a very freeing thing to talk about, because I
Yeah.
think it's like I said, just going on that journey. I didn't have, well, I've got a younger brother, but he was grown up with two older sisters, so I think he's used to
Mm,
being, and now had a daughter, so he's still around feminine
yeah,
energy.
yeah. He's gone the
And
other way.
whereas we just got a kitten who's a girl, and I've got like really girly stuff, because I'm like, I feel like this is bringing some girliness, this
Yeah.
feminine energy to the house. Like she's with me.
I mean, the one thing I do grieve about not having a girl is the clothing. The clothing,
Yeah.
it just doesn't compare. And
Yeah,
I
although I
find
keep
that
being
tough.
told by other boy mums, boy clothes is a lot better now than it used to be.
Goodness me. Okay, well, I'm
Not just
feeling
full of,
grateful then. But
although although the trucks fatigue is
yeah,
a real thing.
t-shirts with trucks is all you can find. And then you walk past the girls and you're like, oh my goodness me, it's beautiful.
And all mine just want is comfy clothing that they can play fight in now. So it
Yeah,
isn't. It's
yeah,
literally like they just don't care. But, which I do think is a nice thing, because I think
yeah.
from what
Well,
I hear, when you've got kids that really care about their
yeah,
clothes,
yeah.
that's like a challenge.
I'm quite lucky. My first, he still loves things quite bright, like reds and pinks and purples,
Oh,
and
that's
like
nice.
both my boys love glitter, and like so we're still in like real like make believe fantasy like play. Like we keep it quite glittery.
No, I like that, and I do think there's a lot said for that, because my oldest child is the magical Disney child who
Yeah,
still's quite into that sort of thing. I'm like, let's
yeah,
keep this for a few
yeah.
more
It's
years,
fun.
kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, this is, oh gosh, I love this. I could talk about boy chat all day, but I think it's really nice space to be like learning about different energies, and how also
yeah,
where you fit in that energy in the
yeah.
early years, again, because you're kind of used to them. When they get older, there'll be other challenges, other
Exactly.
things, but it's not discovering who everyone is
Yeah,
in this
and just sort
household.
of the elbows, and that's the thing about
Elbows, so many elbows. My
so
eldest
many
has lots of
elbows.
elbows.
Yeah, so many elbows, so many cuddles. There's lots of tactileness. Yeah, it's magical on one
Oh.
side and physically painful on the other.
Yeah, it's the jumping. I'm just
So
like,
much jumping.
are you
Yeah,
going to still be jumping on me when you're bigger than
yeah,
me?
yeah. Is this a thing? Yeah, yeah,
On top of everything, Joe, oh, thank you so much for sharing your own journey with this, because I think it's so freeing for everyone. I think like therapists have therapists. How else do you look after your brain?
yeah. So I mean, I guess for me, like I said, my therapist. So wonderful, wonderful support. I've designed a life that suits the way that I am wired, and that's a
Amazing.
lot of how I support my clients. Is I'm always asking and checking in with people like, what do you need? Because for too long, we're often just living lives that we think we should live, or that someone's told
Yeah.
us, this is what we do in this society, or this is how we are. And actually, it doesn't
Especially
fit.
mothers, it's like, well, you should
Totally,
just be at home looking after
totally.
children, putting everyone first. Now
Yeah,
add a career on top of that,
yeah,
looking perfect, looking
exactly.
how everyone expects. But it's
Yeah,
like, hold on, what do I enjoy? And that's where
yeah,
we're
yes,
really coming out from a place with this series on the podcast. Like,
yeah.
what brings you joy, Joe? Because that's what we're
Totally.
doing.
Yeah, and actually, do you know what? You're talking about my mothering self and feeling really like admiring of her. She's much more confident about what she needs than I
Love
used to
that.
be. And that has enabled me to have more joy in my life. It means I take time for myself. I'm not always good at doing it because it's really easy to sort of, in theory, have this idea of I'm
Yeah.
going to do more stuff for myself. It's hard to stick to it. But I do, I really, really try do things like I love my yoga. I go and do my hot yoga. I love doing that.
Oh,
Love seeing my friends. I love kind of being out. I love doing things with the boys that's really like kid friendly. Sounds a bit strange that, something for myself would still involve my kids because, as we've spoken about, we need the break. But when I'm doing something that's really kid focused and they're having
yeah.
fun, I get a lot of joy from that. So
Oh
we,
gosh, especially one-on-one because it's kind of
yeah,
calmer with one. Just
exactly.
so, and
Yeah,
so I've realised the joy in that one
yeah,
focus time doing
totally.
something they love. Yeah,
Totally. I definitely need a balance of like some really fun stuff with them, some really nice stuff just for myself. What else gives me joy? I think it's also just like the little things now, things that like I would have taken for granted before, but just like,
yeah.
after a really busy day or a really busy week, just like sitting down in my lounge, watching a good bit of telly, just enjoying a nice
Oh,
dinner in silence.
yeah.
Like for me, that gives me a lot of joy now.
You appreciate those
Yeah,
things so much more, and I
yeah,
can tell you it does calm down even more for at least it did for us, like because
yeah,
4 and 2 I still felt so in the thick of it.
yeah. It's
My
busy.
2-year-old was very mummy still as well, and
Yeah,
so that the
yeah,
attachment is a thing,
yeah,
but that
yeah,
I love that all brings you joy, and it is the small
yeah,
things as well. It's not
yeah,
meant to be, especially as we're time poor. So
yeah.
it's, we
Exactly.
don't
Yeah,
all have time to go to the
exactly.
gym every single
Yeah,
day and things, but
yeah,
looking after your body as well as your therapist, that's the
totally.
point as well, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I love that
And
that's the theme of this season because joy is it for me. It's quite underrated. It's quite sort
yeah,
of like forgotten actually. And I think there's a bit of a trend of it the last kind of year or so, which is really good. I think if you don't have joy or you're finding it hard to find joy, it takes effort. It takes you've got to think about it a little bit. It's not just being happy. There's joy is a bit of an extra sort of spicy one that is really important.
and I guess actually thinking about it, if you're in a place where you're unaware about your mental health,
Yeah,
it's kind of and I think about this because I suffered quite badly with my first pregnancy, and it was remembering, are you getting joy from anything?
yeah,
And if not,
exactly.
perhaps that's a trigger to think
Yeah,
about, maybe you need a bit of
yes,
support.
yeah, precisely. And that's for me, that's the early detection stuff. Like you said, if you're finding it's hard to find some joy, then chances are your life's not quite how you need it to be, because
Yeah.
if we think about what we need, we need joy, and so we need a life that facilitates us to have that joy.
Yeah, and it's okay to think about your own joy aside from what's gonna
Exactly.
that day out with the family.
Yeah,
That's,
and also that it
at the
might
end of the day, it's still gonna be
change.
work for you.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also it might
Yes.
change.
Yes.
Like you might be in
Yeah.
in a mood where you're like, oh, actually, yeah, I'd love to spend a day with the family today. That's just what I need.
Yeah.
That same Saturday, 2 weeks later, you might be like, literally, I need to be as far away from everyone as possible. I need to be on my own. I don't want to speak to anyone. I'm going to put my earbuds in, and so that
And hormones might be at play there.
yeah, what you need and when it changes. It's really dynamic.
Love that. And Joe, let's finish on. So you're about to also launch into being, aside from everything you do, tech founder. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to launch? Because I found you on Instagram the other day, your new business, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is up on Instagram.
So I'm it's kind of well, it's come through working obviously through the NHS and working in my current business and this sense what we've been talking about of people don't understand what they need. I'm really seeing that. Lots of my clients come to me really, really early stages in mental health struggles and still they don't have a sense of what they need, and it's because no one tells us. So I'm building this kind of tech platform that hopes to kind of solve this problem of, well, it solves three problems. The first problem is people not knowing what they need. So the platform aims to help you to understand, like, okay, who am I? What are my needs, like mental health wise, and how can I design a life that suits me? Like, never mind all the noise of like what's normal, like what's my
Yeah.
norm, like what's my
Yeah.
norm kind of thing. And then the second part of it is it's going to be like it's a directory really to sort of signpost people to different services out there, podcasts like this one, anything that
Yeah.
is like helpful to mental health, which might be
Yeah.
something really obvious like a self-care app, or it might be something really not explicit, but some kind of community that like is going to give someone a
Painting or
sense of,
something.
yeah,
That
just
like that comes to
like a
me.
real
Yeah.
creative directory of like
Yeah.
good spaces that's going to help mental health. And then finally, it's also going to be a kind of mini me in your pocket. So an AI
A
kind of
mini
tool
Jo.
based on me. Yeah, that
Yeah.
not going to replace therapy, but like a bit of an early kind of check-in, like basically as if you had a psychologist as your best friend, that you could just like
Yeah.
send a quick message and be like, oh, like, what about this? Or I'm feeling a bit anxious about this, or I don't know, my friend's just had a baby. I don't know if she's struggling, like just a real sort of early access, easy in your pocket mental health sort of advocate for you. And the
And I love
plan,
the
yeah.
flip side of that, what
Mm,
you've just said, is that checking in on a friend as well, because it might help you if you don't know how to support
yeah,
someone. Because,
yeah,
like, I've seen that a lot in other people, is
yeah,
that you don't, because you've not been through it yourself. I think,
yeah,
especially with mothers, when you have pre-motherhood, it's like, okay, how is
yeah.
the best way I can check in on this person?
Yes,
And getting
exactly.
that help is no bad thing,
Exactly.
is it?
No, exactly. And that's for me is one of the biggest barriers, is that's why for me the platform I'm creating is to make things so much more accessible. We've spoken today about actually therapy is really, or sort of therapeutic advice is really only available if you knock on doors, or you know someone, or you've got the money to pay for it. The platform I'm creating is, I'm not going to be sort of selling it to everyone and saying, you need this, you need this. It's for people that are interested and they want to learn more about themselves, and they want to have sort of much more affordable access to looking at life through a therapeutic lens. And for me,
Yeah.
like, that's really lacking. We don't give enough information and education to people. And so I want this platform to be a really, really early, like, I want it to just be right there ready for people who are interested in wanting to use it.
I'm so excited for that. And can you tell us any more? Like, do you know when we're able to get our hands on it? What
Yeah,
stage are you
so
at with it?
currently it's almost ready to be tested. Just about to sort of do a waiting list at the moment because lots of people have sort of wanted to sort of test it out. So yeah, gonna hopefully by next. I'm hoping to try and test it really soon, and then maybe like next spring somewhere it might be available for people.
Amazing.
I'm hoping. Yeah.
Amazing. We'll be
So
shouting it out when
yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
yeah. It's called, I've called it the norm because I sort of want to flip this idea of normal on its head. For me, it's
Yeah.
like there's not a normal, but there is a norm for you. Like there is your norm. And
Yes.
like protect and respect your norm. Know what it
Yeah.
is. Keep looking after it, and you're more likely to thrive. You still might need mental health support, but you'll be in a much better space. You'll be much more protected.
And you'll get it sooner by the
Yeah.
sounds of it, kind of
Yes.
thing,
Yeah,
because you'll
exactly.
understand
Yeah.
and you'll be able to be like, this isn't normal for
Yeah.
me.
And also, do you know what
Love it.
for me, like, there's still this culture of like, right, you're either well or you're unwell. And like, if you're
Yes.
well, you go and live your life. And if you're unwell, you need therapy or you need medication. And for me, it's
And you're
not
one of
like
those
that.
people, and that's going to be you
Yeah. And
then
it's
forever.
just
That's
really
what I
not like that.
completely
Yeah.
felt my first
Yeah.
pregnancy, and it was like,
Exactly.
great.
Yeah.
And that's why it took me so long to get help, because I didn't want to be one of those
Yeah.
people, and
And
that sounds terrible. So
exactly. But
everyone, it's not how I feel
yeah,
now, but that's how I
yeah.
felt at the
And
time.
for
Yeah.
me it's so not like that. I honestly think like mental health, physical health, they fluctuate, things get tricky. Like you have like what I say, muddy years and you need a bit of more scaffolding and support. Then you have a sunny year and like you think you're on top of the world. And for me, I like one of the reasons I've built this platform is the part of it that is information giving and helps you to think about your own mental health needs, gets you to think about your life and what's missing or what's going well. And you might be feeling quite low and sad, and it might actually not be a therapy it need. It might be that you missed your best friend and you haven't gone out with her as much as you need to this month. It's like
Yeah.
we've got to be a bit creative and think about what we need as individuals. And it's not such a linear thing of I'm well or I'm not well, I'm therapy or I'm not therapy, I need this, I don't. It's like, who are you? What do you need? And let's create a life that suits you.
Oh, I love that. And I cannot wait for this to be launched. I know it's going to be a game changer, and a female founder doing it as well, and a
Yeah.
mother.
Oh,
So
thank
it's
you.
so exciting. Where
Yeah.
can people find you, Jo, if they want to learn more or be on this waiting list for the app when
Yeah,
it comes out?
so yeah, obviously you can email me. I have just set up the Instagram. I'm terrible on social media, so don't expect too much of it. But yeah, the Norm's gonna have a little profile that's just gonna like chip away, and I'll probably put the waiting list on there. So yeah, follow. I think it's Welcome to the Norm, and yeah, just keep your eyes peeled. I'm not gonna be. we're going to do a bit of a different approach with this platform, because I feel like there is a real culture of just selling and just saying to people, you need this, you need this, you need this.
Yeah.
And that is, the norm is like, not that. The norm is the opposite to that. The norm is like, look, we're here. There is this available. If you seem interested in it, you probably might need it or want it, but we're not here to sort of sell it. So it's going to be hopefully a product that people recommend to each other because they like it and they think it's good, and someone can give it a try, and if they like it, they'll stick with it. I'm going for like, I just want to focus on building a really good product that's useful and effective. And if that's the case, then people will use it, hopefully.
Oh, they will. I will be using it, so I can't wait.
Well, maybe
I'm
you
going to
can
put
test it
myself on
then,
the waiting list.
Okay.
Yeah, I will.
Tester.
I'm
Yeah.
a tester.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jo. Happy World Mental Health Day. I think maybe we should also end where, if people are knowing they might need support, where is there anywhere who should they turn to?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's an important day, isn't it, for people? For many people, they'll feel quite empowered by today if they're feeling in a good space and they're looking after themselves. And for some other people, it's going to be a real triggering day. So I would say, just firstly, look in your network, your immediate network, your friends, your family. Who are the people that you check in? There's always a fear of checking in with people and thinking, oh, I'll be a burden, or I don't want to. But if it was the other way around, you want people to reach out. People love helping people. They really do. It's never a burden. So check in with your network. If not your network, Google. You've got local services. You've got Samaritans. You can check in, even like ChatGPT now. There's some really good kind of like mental health info on there. So just look after yourself. And look, I think the other thing to say is maybe be the other end. Be the person that checks in on someone today. It's World Mental Health Day. Choose a friend, choose a buddy or family member that you think, oh, I'll just check in how they're doing. Just message them and say, hey, how's it going? That's really where we can make a difference.
And one time I saw a friend checked in on me and said, how is your mind doing? And I think that was a lovely way for them to check in. So I'll add that.
That's really nice. Yeah.
It was, noted.
Yeah, another one that's quite nice, instead of like, oh, hi, how are you? Because you often get, oh, I'm fine, how are you? You can always go with like, hey, tell me what's been the highs and lows this week. That's quite nice.
That.
People can then share like something that they're pleased about, and it kind of gives them a bit of confidence to go, but also, this is stressing me out.
Yes, I think I'm going to do that on my group chat today.
Everyone's
see if any of them are listening to this.
Yeah.
They'll be like, okay, Caroline, you got Dr. Jo's advice.
Dr. Jo said that, didn't she?
I'm like, yeah, should all listen. Well, no, thank you so much. And I can't wait to have you back and we can talk about the app in more detail in a couple of years' time.
Oh, yeah, that'll be lovely. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Yeah. And everyone else, just look after yourself. Yeah, just keep an eye on yourself and prioritize your own needs. It's not selfish, okay? We need to let go of this term selfish. It's actually self-full. You're just going to be self-full and look after yourself.
Self-full.
Yeah.
Love it. Let's end on that. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Bump to Business Owner. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please do rate, review, follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. It really helps us to connect with more mums and business owners. You can DM me on @BumpToBusinessOwner on Instagram, and I'll be back next week.